It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
It's a pretty big day today because this Follow the Money report, I think, is huge. Conduit for Commerce. As we go over to Conduit News, you can check this out, but conduitnews.com reporting that Conduit for Commerce has a new report out, Follow the Money. It specifically focuses on the Arkansas Republican primaries. Here to talk more about this, we've got Mr. Josh Waters is back with us on the line. Josh, good morning. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, good morning, Paul.
Yes, so tell us a little bit about this. I mean, what do you see? First of all, overall, what is the big takeaway from this report? We're going to get into the numbers here in a minute, but what do you think the big takeaway from this report is?
I think the big takeaway, Paul, is if you really want to know what the special interests are behind and the reasons behind some of the votes we see from our legislators, you need to follow the money. And that's said over and over again, but sometimes that's hard to do. And so what this report does is put it in a succinct format to where people can see exactly how much they got overall, but also further breakdown of the interest behind that money. And so I think one of the slogans there and one of the takeaways is to know which way the votes are going, see which way the campaign cash is flowing. And I think that's the big takeaway. And maybe underneath that, for the Republican primary aspect, you saw kind of this dynamic set up in these Republican races between, limited government, pro-small business, PACs, and individuals and others, almost uniformly lined up then against kind of the monolith, to use a word from someone else, of these special interests and lobbyists that unified against those other candidates who are supported by those PACs that were limited government and conservative. And so, those special interests don't have, or I would say probably don't have, principles of limited government and conservative behind the reason they're giving and donating to these candidates. Whereas, you look at these PACs, the limited government PACs, Commerce and Action, it's all based on the principles of limited government and less government. And so I think that's the big takeaway from this. When you follow the money, that's really what you saw in most of these primaries that we looked at.
Right now on the screen, we've got the special election that happened in the Senate District 16. The Republican primary, rather, in Senate District 16. This was, this is one that I'm certainly familiar with. You had establishment-backed Breanne Davis, who was victorious over limited government Bob Bailey. And look at the difference here. You have the total raise, Breanne Davis, $162,470. Bob Bailey, his total was $47,685. And, I mean, really, number one, with $47,685, Bob Bailey did extremely well in terms of the amount of votes that he got in the first, the first election and the runoff. It really does say that, even if you are, and this, by the way, drove the establishment nuts, they started complaining about money from outside the district and everything else when most of Breanne Davis's money, a lot of that was coming from, let's see, out of district, 76.9% of her money came from out of district, which is essentially the exact same amount that came to Bob Bailey. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, this is a really concise breakdown here. I mean, look, Josh, at the healthcare-related contributions. Breanne Davis with $52,325 in healthcare-related contributions to Bob Bailey's $2,350. You think maybe that healthcare or Obamacare private option was a big decider or influencer in this particular election?
Yeah, Paul, I think when you look at those numbers, you can really say that, and that's a reason why Conduit for Commerce put out this report. It's one thing to go on and look on the website and see the name of a person or the name of an entity gave, $2,700. Well, what does that really mean? And so what Conduit for Commerce did was dig deeper and look at, okay, who is this entity? Are they represented by lobbyists? Cross-referencing lobbyist reports, cross-referencing the names of officers on political action committees, and really being able to group these together and see the interests that are actually behind the name or the PAC or the entity.
Now,
and so when you look at that, go ahead.
I was just say, so that must have been a daunting task. I mean, what you're talking about is, okay, here's, like you said, here's just a $2,700 contribution. But how do you determine, okay, that's a healthcare related contribution?
That's a great question, and I'm really excited to see the report in the final format it's in, because when I first came on and started doing work for Conduit for Commerce when I was in law school, this was one of the first projects I worked on. And back then, we didn't have the system that we have now online, where you can go on and basically download in a spreadsheet all the data of the contributions. Back then, you had to go line by line on these financial disclosure reports and enter it into the spreadsheet and then look it all up. So I also want to give a shout-out to Hannah Webb. She helped us a lot doing a lot of this research up front, pulling this data, organizing it, sorting it. And then, most of this is all public information. Maybe looking more into some websites, but if you have an internet connection, you can find most all this information out there. It's then being able to get it all and basically connect the dots, showing, okay, well, this person's an officer in this PAC, but they're also aligned with this organization. That organization is represented by this lobbyist. And
Wow.
so just drawing, connecting the dots, it was a process that took several months to get to the final form. But that's the importance of following the money. It's not just looking at the name or something, but looking at the interest behind the money.
So I would imagine if you've got an officer of a political action committee, and that political action committee gives to a particular candidate, and then the officer themselves gives an individual contribution, then that would all go under the same special interest.
Yes, and, in the report, when you look through, and the way we kind of put it is comparing kind of big numbers, total amount raised versus total amount raised, breaking it down in district, out of district, the healthcare-related number. So that's the first part of the report, looking at the individual races. Next, a big and even more finer detail is each individual candidate, almost all of their larger contributions are laid out under their name and show, when you group them together, okay, how much total did they actually get from people and entities and PACs associated with the Arkansas Hospital Association or the Arkansas Healthcare Association. So we have that. And then even further than that, Paul, you can go just look at the Arkansas Healthcare Association in the report and see, okay, how does their breakdown among candidates that they gave to? And so it really does a good job looking at from kind of three different ways of following the money to the elections themselves, to the candidate, and then looking at the people and interest behind some of these PACs and other organizations.
Yeah, and Joe, scrolling down to get to that we want to focus on some of these other races as well. But Joe, scrolling down to show the other methodology in terms of breaking down the Arkansas Healthcare Association. Yeah, right there, Joe. So you can see where everything is broken out. You see ASA PAC there, Arkansas Medical Society Association. I mean, this is pretty detailed stuff. I do have to point out there on the last slide with the Breanne Davis and the Bob Bailey situation, she raised more, not just more total, 162,000 versus 47,000, but her health care contributions are 52,325. So from the healthcare industry alone, she outraised Bob Bailey. That to me is a huge number.
Yeah, and a little caveat in there, we did include in there, the non-money contributions, because those could have been things like a mailer or an ad in a newspaper, and so they were, going towards the election or defeat of a candidate. And Bob Bailey did have a significant number of non-money contributions, but actual, hard money contributions, that was the number. She had more hard money contributions from healthcare-related interests.
This summary here, being an open Senate seat with candidates on both sides of the GOP, big government establishment and limited government conservative, Senate District 16 race is the poster child for how special interests in Arkansas work together, regardless of party affiliation, to elect the candidate least likely to vote for smaller government or significant changes in state house policies. That right there may be, I think, one of the most powerful parts in this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. there's actually a separate presentation that's done. Conduit co-founders Brenda Vassar-Taylor and Joe Maynard, and it's kind of the anatomy of a Republican primary, and it's probably 50 or 60 pages of documents looking at, the financial disclosures, looking at the mailers, looking at the ads in newspapers, and comparing the messaging, comparing who's backing who. And that was a really good example, I think, that race of seeing the interests that are represented on both sides there. So thankful for Conduit co-founder Brenda Vassar-Taylor for her work on this. And also want to give a shout-out to Alice Norman, who did a lot of the great design work that really made this look and pop the way that people need to, consume it. And so I really appreciate all of her work on this as well.
All right, let's look at the James Sturch race and the Linda Collins Smith race. Let's look at their financials. Joe's got that up for us. James Sturch raising a total of $77,724.85. Linda Collins Smith, $34,546. Now look again at the healthcare-related contributions. James Sturch getting $35,000 out of his $77,000 from healthcare-related contributions. Linda Collins Smith, $6,050 of her $34,000 from healthcare-related contributions. I mean, here it is again. Healthcare is, this is the driving force. This is what it seems to me. I mean, if you take this out, it's the driving force of who's controlling, who gets to, who gets to be in office. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, and Paul, going back a few years, you really saw an uptick in that number after the private option, now what's called Arkansas Works, was passed. That was really when I first started looking at these numbers and comparing them, kind of 2010, 2012 races, and then 2014, 2016. The healthcare-related interest in money has just really gone up and up and up each cycle. And it's a $2 billion program, the Arkansas Works, Obamacare Medicaid expansion program. And so it's needing to be protected.
And we see this again. Now we're looking at Cole Peck. Cole Peck was backed by healthcare, the healthcare lobby, a big time. You have Cole Peck raising $60,000 against incumbent State Representative Dan Sullivan. Now, Dan Sullivan here actually, he won. He's one of the limited government candidates on this list, the few that won. But then again, you look, healthcare-related contributions, $35,000 of his $60,000 came from healthcare industry. Dan Sullivan, $6,300 of his $46,000 came from the healthcare. I mean, again, similar. We're seeing the same thing. Scrolling down to Bob Ballinger and Brian King. No surprise here. Brian gets the least out of all the limited government candidates. Brian King gets the least from healthcare-related contributions so far. Bob Ballinger raises a total of $77,714 to Brian King's $85,000. But healthcare-related contributions, $33,390 go to Bob Ballinger. 1,450 healthcare-related contributions go to Senator Brian King. Of course, Bob Ballinger beat Senator King in that primary. But again, look at the who's controlling, who is the special interest, and they are winning. And I'm tired of them winning, quite frankly.
Yeah, and Paul, this something else too. This is just money raised. I know with Cole Peck as an example, he actually spent, I think, north of $100,000 because he put in so much of his own money. And this is also only money that's been reported. There might be people out there, interests out there that have, personally done things, spent money or time or whatever that didn't end up on a financial report. And I think, the Ballinger race as well, he outspent Brian King because he was able to move over a lot of carryover funds from previous campaigns. And so this is just, money raised.
Okay.
But when you look at money spent, some of these candidates will outspend even more than what they raised.
I got you. That's a good point to make, that they spent more than they raised. Then you scroll down here to the other race at a Senate District 8 at a Fort Smith. You had Matt Pitch, State Representative Matt Pitch versus former State Representative Frank Glidewell. He raised a total of $124,000 to Frank Glidewell's $25,000. Frank Glidewell only getting $500, according to this report, from healthcare-related contributions. Matt Pitch getting $20,300 out of his $124,000. Again, we see that you have the same kingmakers who are picking sides. Again, regardless of political affiliation, it doesn't matter about party affiliation. It is who is least likely to vote for, I guess, a bigger government, and that's what's going to determine who they support or who they oppose.
Yeah.
Rather, who they oppose.
Right, and you see this, and that's why I wanted to put this report together, because under Arkansas law, an individual or PAC or whoever can donate $2,700 per election. Well, $2,700, isn't the 50, 40,000, whatever number, we end up with these totals. But when you look across races in every primary, some of the same PACs and individuals and groups giving, max contributions to almost all of these candidates, these more establishment candidates, you really see the impact that they have. And, Paul, they're not able to do that just in these few Republican primary races. They have enough money to do that across the state, cycle after cycle, in just about any primary or general election that they want. If the more limited government side spends, 40 or 50,000, they're going to spend 100,000 every time, every race. And until that changes, I'm not sure, what the path forward is. But, I would encourage people that you don't have to have the most money. That's been proven, but you do have to have enough money.
We're talking with Josh Waters, and I really appreciate you breaking this down with us. I've scrolled down in the report, the Follow the Money report, to where I guess you actually have specific special interests that have now been named. I think this might be the best part. I love the candidate breakdown, but for example, when you get to the actual part on special interests, where it says right here, Stevens Group. So Stevens Group, you guys give a history of when they were when they started, 1933. How the Stevens Group contributions to candidates of interest of $21,950, and you break it down into each race: Brian Davis, James Church, Dan Sullivan, Bob Ballinger, Matt Pitch. And I think this is very telling. What made you guys want to really break it down to really highlight for the average person who the big players are?
That, like I was saying before, it is hard to see, just a name. And a lot of times on these financial reports, it's, similar interests. They all gave it the same day, so it's a little easier to put them together. But, an officer, the name of an officer in one PAC and how that applies to, I think the names are listed there of individuals who are then associated with the Stevens Group or work for the Stevens Group. Same thing with, the healthcare association group. There's specific individuals who are associated and tied in with that. Michael Morton, David Norsworthy. These names that you see over and over again, it's really one interest, even though it's separated out among different PACs, different individuals. It's kind of the same interest that is represented. And we wanted to be able to show people what that interest is and then the financial impact of that interest in these races.
So, yeah, just to name a few, you've got the Stevens Group broken down, the Walton family broken down, Arkansas Healthcare Association broken down, DBH Management Consultants broken down, Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce. Then you have big players who donated under $20,000. Now, we also have this page right here, Commerce in Action. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, talk a little bit about this, because I think it's good that we, that this is out there as well. This is the Limited Government Conservative, Political Action Committee, and they're putting out money as well here.
Yeah, it's a public record that Commerce in Action, the associated PACs, are very involved in elections and give a lot of money to candidates that are limited government, conservative, pro-small business candidates. And we wanted to include that in the picture because that's the state of Arkansas politics. And so when you look at that and kind of see that number, it's, a significant number and lines up with some of these other interests. But when you add all those other interests together and how they're basically unified compared to, Commerce in Action and, not just groups or individuals,
I think we've lost Josh. Josh, are you there? Well, we have to go to break anyway. Hey, folks, it's really good stuff. Great information. You're not going to get this anywhere else. It's on the front page right now of conduitnews.com. This brand new Follow the Money report that Conduit for Commerce has produced, and it is up right now at conduitnews.com. All right, so we got disconnected. Welcome back to the program, folks. We got disconnected earlier when we were talking to Mr. Josh Waters, and we were talking about the new Follow the Money report that's up right now at conduitnews.com from Conduit for Commerce. Josh, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Paul, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm on the road to Little Rock this morning. The tax task force is meeting, so I encourage people to stay tuned to conduitnews.com, Conduit News Twitter for updates on that. But really just wanted to call in and encourage people to go out there and support Conduit for Commerce. You know, this Follow the Money report, the legislative scorecard, all the other educational reports and presentations they do, and the other Conduit organizations as well, Conduit for Action. They can support your show through Patreon. And I just want to call in and encourage people if they appreciate all the information that's put out there to go online at conduitforcommerce.org and donate there online. It's very simple. Just wanted to encourage your listeners on that, and just appreciate the opportunity to come on and everything that you do, Paul.
And I really appreciate you calling back in to say that, because I would echo that. You know, you can't accept, or Conduit for Commerce does accept donations. For those of you who are just joining us and you missed the first part of this hour, we talked to Josh about this new report. It is shining. It's really a sunshine. I'm sorry, sunshine on what is a really dark, environment in terms of following the money. Who are the kingmakers? This report is detailed. I mean, it is very specific. In Republican primaries, who supports who, and you see the same players over and over and over again. That's why this is so valuable. In reports like this, presentations like this, it requires money to operate. Josh, I know you would agree.
Yes, that at the end of the day, it's something we say, knowledge is power and liberty is not free. And so I just say that, encourage people however they can support, a monthly basis, yearly basis. There's so many different ways they can support, and it would encourage people to do that.
All right, Josh Waters, you have fun at the task force meeting. Have a good time.
All righty. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Folks, you can follow Conduit News' Twitter. It's just at Conduit News, and go to conduitnews.com to check out this report. I'm just going to read for you the takeaways of the report. It's towards the end here. If you want to know which way the political winds are blowing, it helps to know which way the campaign cash is flowing. By tracking the funding of selected Republican primaries in 2018, Conduit for Commerce presents this comprehensive report to educate on who has the greatest influence on government policies in the state of Arkansas. In summary, this report reveals how big government establishment candidates were primarily supported by a monolith of individuals, corporations, and PACs that represent Arkansas special interests, which then work together as a finely oiled machine to elect their preferred candidates. Conduit for Commerce educates on the benefits of economic freedom, individual liberty, and limited government to ensure the highest quality of life for all Arkansans. In order to achieve this mission, Conduit for Commerce focuses on Arkansas small business first, as they are the backbone of a strong economy that can improve lives. And then, of course, to support Conduit for Commerce, you can go to conduitforcommerce.org. This is a fantastic report. My favorite part is how they call out the big players. I love how they call out specifically the special interests. They've done the research, and it was hard to do. You heard Josh talk about how, look, okay, this person who gave the maximum contribution of $2,700, okay, is this person also on the board of a political action committee? Ah, yes. Well, did that political action committee also give to the same candidate? They did. Okay, so they represent the same interests. So person individually giving $2,700. Okay, this person individually gives $2,700, but is also works for a lobbyist group, and this lobbying group has a client that is healthcare special interest or education, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so now we're going to lump Now we're going to say and deduce, okay, this $2,700 individual contribution to the same candidate that the Political Action Committee made, or that the lobbying firm is making money off of the special interest by, being on retainer. Then you can kind of infer which money is allied with whom, or, with what. So that is the report. It's up right now at conduitnews.com. Check it out. Really great research that is done, and I think you're going to enjoy it.